Oh, I have my practitioner, Curtis, here. He was on a previous episode, so definitely check that out. But he's back again just because he is a wealth of knowledge. He has helped me so much with my health. And I have been getting a lot of questions about peptides for ulcerative colitis. And, I know a few things. I have some experience, but at the same time, Curtis is the guy to go to for the peptides when it comes to UC. So I invited him back again. So welcome, Curtis.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this. Like I was mentioning earlier, I prepared a bunch of stuff, so should be good.
Yeah, yeah. Will you just give listeners a brief intro just in case this is the first time that they've heard you speak on the podcast?
Yeah, so I suppose today's topic is about ulcerative colitis, and so plenty of experience with working with IBD generally, but in my position as I like to maybe if I had to put a label on things as an integrative practitioner rather than functional medicine, because as each year goes on and on, like every title is getting a bad rep, whatever it may be, kind of idea. So you try to avoid like falling into that. But normally working with everything you could think of, because if someone does take the time and refer back to the first podcast where you and I discussed how 95 to 99% of ailment, disease, et cetera, is of mitochondrial origin, not genetic origin, et cetera. And so just working with that as a whole to help people heal. And we're talking about peptides today, and that plays a big role into it. So definitely well versed in the peptide realm. And so it makes things interesting for sure.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited to dive into this. And before we get going, all the disclaimers, this episode is for educational purposes only. We are not doctors. Please talk to your own doctor before implementing any of these things into your lifestyle. So all the disclaimers. So yeah, I guess, just start at the beginning. We were talking before we hit record, and the peptides are a tool in the toolbox. They are not the magical cure for this condition. But they can be super duper helpful, and they've personally helped me a ton. So somebody who has UC, they're thinking about the peptides, like where would you start them? Like where would be step one of all of this?
So one thing that I'd like to start this off with is just saying that when we look at a peptide, think of it as it can enhance normal physiological processes. So always keep that in mind that you can push your body past homeostasis. We can push it past balance, which is what we're doing with the peptide. Like that's the entire point of it. But just be aware that there is always context involved, and not every symptom is a bad symptom. And that's kind of what I wanted to tap on today is when we talk about a specific peptide, I want to talk about the specific or the potential symptoms that could occur with using this peptide. And so just know that when you are diving into the realm of peptides, that it is enhancing physiological processes. So it's taking you past a normal response. I just want to put that out there. There's a little disclaimer there, right? But given that, that's what can make them so successful, because we are in such a damaging society that is set up for us to fail, that we need that chemical pressure. We need that pressure in order for our body to heal, because your traditional supplements are just not cutting it anymore. Now, as we talked about in the first podcast there, it's your environment, your light and dark cycle. So always focus on that first before peptides, but you accompany peptides with that. Now, this is where you can really see magic happen. And so when we look at ulcerative colitis, it is classified as an autoimmune disease. So I wanted to start by talking about the immune system peptides first. And a great place that someone could start with commonly is something known as thymosin alpha 1. And that peptide there can do a really good job at shifting the immune response. So, what do I mean by that? The immune system functions as a teeter-totter. It's not up or down like most people think. So, one side is suppressed. There's most likely another side that is heightened. And in the case of ulcerative colitis, it is very commonly Th17, which is a catabolic side of the immune response that is designed to break down undigested proteins in the blood. So what are undigested proteins? Literally like almost everything that can get into the blood, bacterias and candidas and food particles, toxins, etc. So we tend to see a lot of flares because that Th17 response is just being active. Your body's not making a mistake. The Th17 response is just doing what it's designed to do. And so thymosin alpha 1 can do a really good job at balancing out that immune response because it is known to activate T regulatory cells. So that's your balancing of that teeter totter. And so when we initially start with thymosin alpha 1, there's the potential to decrease a lot of immediate symptoms. And that's kind of how you look at thymosin alpha 1. If you need help today, like you're in a big flare, there's lots of blood, you could really consider thymosin alpha 1 because it's designed for I need help today. So if we want to go beyond that, we look at it from like a heart attack or sepsis or something, right? If you just had a heart attack, you could thymosin alpha 1 is like going to help you right now. If you contracted sepsis, thymosin alpha 1 is going to help you right now. So it's a very powerful heavy hitter. Now, obviously, dosage dependent on what it can do. The bigger the problem, the higher the dose, but that could range anywhere from 200 mcg to 5 milligrams. And so that is where it is very person dependent. But at low doses, it can do a good job of balancing out that immune response, lessening those autoimmune symptoms. Now, what I really want to talk about with all of these peptides, like you and I were just discussing, is that many people on podcasts will be like, hey, like this is a great peptide and here's what it does and here's how it can help you. But no one that I'm aware of really brings up that, hey, there are potential symptoms. I don't like using the word side effects, more the word responses. And so when you look at something like thymosin alpha 1, you can push the immune system too far the other way. You can start going more to what is known as Th1, that's more intracellular, but still catabolic. So you can push the immune system too much the other way. So that could be dosage dependent. That could even just be time dependent. Another thing that happens too is when your immune system shifts like that, there are a lot of big infections that go under the radar that the immune system just isn't recognizing, either A, because they're inside of the cell or something like that. So when you start shifting that immune response, that immune system can now see that infection. So it can start going after it. So we think it's making us worse. I get that all the time with something like thymosin alpha 1. I got way worse on thymosin alpha 1. It's like, no, 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 no. You just spotted an infection. You just started fighting an infection. So you stimulated that immune response. And this is probably going to be a big topic of all the peptides. You had low antioxidant system. You had low glutathione, low levels of catalase, things like this. So you couldn't deal with the die-off of killing that infection because infections, when they die, they'll release toxic byproducts. And I don't know if your viewers are familiar with the Herxheimer's reaction, but
Maybe.
yeah, so when you get a Herxheimer, the problem
I know
is
what it is, but yeah.
if you look up Herxheimer, there's like 300 things that fall under Herxheimer's. It's just generally feeling worse. It's just feeling worse is what it is. And so whether that be diarrhea, constipation, headaches, sleep problems, mood issues, you name it, bloating, so that's what I mean by a response. It's not a side effect. It's just a normal response. But having that information, you probably want to go slow and steady. Because another thing that happens too is like, what comes to my mind is like, if a dog is sleeping and you scare that dog and it jumps up, and even though that dog loves you to death, it'll still just bite or whatever because you scared it. That's kind of like what can happen with the immune system. You could wake it up and then it just starts attacking. It's just doing what it's designed to do. So that's where you want to watch with thymosin alpha 1, as mentioned, dosage dependent, because I just mentioned anywhere from 200 mcg to 5 milligrams, you could do 50 mcg. Right? Don't be afraid to go outside of the norm or what you read online or a Reddit forum for when it comes to dosages. You can do a very low dose. But another place that this is applicable, even outside of ulcerative colitis, is like going to the airport where there's a bunch of infections, or if you feel like you're getting sick, right? So it has tremendous benefits. So simply put, it can balance out the immune response. So it can reduce a dominant side where you don't want to be, it can balance that out and help fight infections because a big causation of ulcerative colitis symptoms are infections. So it gives you that ability back to fight these infections. So that's where thymosin alpha 1 comes in. And most people with UC are, if they're watching this podcast, they're probably in more of a panic state. Maybe I'm wrong, right? So they do need that immediate help. So that's why I started with thymosin alpha 1. It could be a really great place to start with that.
Yeah. Okay. I got lots of questions after all that. So This would be one that you use when you have a flare going on. And I assume this is something that could be used for other autoimmune conditions, just as far as what it does with the immune system. And as you were talking, I was like, this is the reason why you work with a practitioner who knows what they're doing, because just what you were saying, as far as like the side effects and how to actually use this. Um, Another peptide that we used in the beginning, which I think was super duper helpful. I would love to like know a little bit more about how KPV compares with this, because I think that was the first peptide maybe you
Yeah.
started with, and it has helped as far as like getting me out of flares and when I'm having symptoms. But will you talk a little bit about that one and maybe how it's different from Thymogen
For
alpha?
sure. Yeah, and that's literally how my list goes next was
Oh,
KPV.
okay, good.
One of the reasons why KPV I want to talk about next is because of the thymosin alpha 1 promoting inflammation. So KPV, easily summarized, can suppress NF kappa B. What is NF kappa B? Think of it as like a master switch for your inflammation. So it's a big switch to turn on a lot of inflammatory processes. So KPV can reduce the overall inflammatory response and even oxidative stress. It's been shown to even reduce oxidative stress. Now, that's pretty much all we need to say about KPV. It's awesome, right? It's really awesome. It's just really good at driving down overall systemic inflammation because it can help suppress that master switch. Now, when you look at that though, remember we can over suppress things. This could be a dosage thing. This could be a time thing, more a dosage thing. This is more a dosage thing. Once again, we are in such a, our society is just so sickening to us that it can be pretty difficult to overmanage inflammation if you are being responsible. But if you did like a whole vial of KPV, you could probably, overmanage things. And then we can shift the microbiome and infections can surface and create symptoms and whatnot. But a big thing to consider about KPV, I do find it like a 50-50 thing, if I'm being honest. 50% of the time it works really well. The other 50% either doesn't do anything because it was maybe more infectious driven or environmental driven, but it also acts on a melanocyte pathway. I'm not going to go into details what that is. It's just a really big pathway. It's a pathway that is responsible for many things within the body. So your genetics or your environment, when that KPV enters your system, it could change the structure. It could change what KPV does, and it could take it away from shutting off the switch and do who knows what. It could actually increase histamine in some cases. This is very rare. Once again, I just want to lay this out there so somebody doesn't do it and they're like, oh my goodness, he said it would do this, but this is what it's doing, right? No, no, no. It has that potential to do other things. But when it works well, like in your case, it is very good for driving down overall inflammation within the body. So,
Yeah, I mean, that was the first one we tried, and I was like, oh my gosh, these peptides, something's working. Okay, so KPV is great for the inflammation. Is that one that you could use long term, or is it more in like a flare situation?
I mean, you could, yes, because as mentioned, it'd be very difficult to over manage inflammation. And so you most definitely could use that one, yes, long term. um at micro doses, even stuff like that, because like especially people like yourself and myself who are what we would say is burning the candle at both ends, like that constantly working and that entrepreneurship and everything, that's inflammation, right? We think of inflammation as like autoimmune diseases or, whatever, getting sick, but no, it's even just stress in general and the air you breathe. And so, yeah, like a person could definitely do KPV long term. You would just want to watch the shifting of the microbiome. And so, like, I don't ever recommend any peptide long term, but long term cyclically, you
Yeah.
could probably do.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
right here and there.
And then kind of related, I think, and maybe next on your list, where would like TB 500 fit in as far as like
Yeah.
inflammation? I mean, we often, stack that or pair it with BPC 157, and that has been helpful as well. But yeah, where does that fit into all this?
Let's talk kind of like BPC and TB 500
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Slight differences, obviously, but we'll talk about it together. So to simplify it, those two are going to help heal tissue. They're going to help rebuild tissue. So what does that mean? Well, if the tissue's damaged, that means there's an inflammatory response. That means inflammation is being produced because inflammation is designed to break down that damaged tissue. So if you're repairing it with this Wolverine stack, I'm sure everyone's aware of, then you don't need that inflammation. You don't need that, right? Like you are going to still get some inflammation because rebuilding tissue, the inflammatory process plays a role in that, like a big role in that, obviously. So you still get a little bit, but you're healing, and that takes away that catabolic inflammatory response. So if that tissue is fixed, the immune system's like, oh, well, I don't need to go after this anymore. And so that's why BPC and TB500, and yes, like it does have a lot to do with the mucosal lining as well. The BPC more has a lot to do with repairing the tight junctions in the gut. So you get less leaky gut and things like that. And so it's just overall healing, just rapidly repairing tissue. Now, it's not like when you repair that tissue, it just the damage debris goes away. So you also have to consider herx. You also have to consider, I guess I should mention this on a positive note, is the increased blood flow. So you get more veins and everything to those tissues. So you get better nutrient delivery, better oxygen delivery. So we get better tissue function, cellular function that way as well. But once again, that can create an inflammatory response, usually very short-lived. Now, with BPC, though, you really don't want to use it with cancer. You want to keep it away from that because it can cause tumor cell growth, cancer cell growth. So you want to, like early stages, there's evidence that BPC could actually help by driving down that inflammatory response. But in the later stages, you definitely don't want to touch BPC with that. TB500 should be fine. TB500 should be fine. But I just always want to throw that out there about BPC because BPC and TB500 are the absolutely most talked about, I believe.
Oh yeah,
So
super popular. I mean, I think that's the first peptide I brought to my doctor, and he was like, nah, blew me off.
yeah,
But the other thing I want to talk about, because I get this question a lot too, is BPC 157 as far as injection versus capsule versus, you know, putting it in your mouth as you told me to do. So we talk a little bit about that.
yeah. So I mean, like capsule wise, you're obviously getting to just the gut. And so I guess to try to explain this is the gut's supposed to have a barrier. Like it's not supposed to be leaking. And if it is leaking, which it is in most of us, it's not like it's leaking a ton. And so when you take BPC orally, it can be really good for that GI lining. It can be good for the tight junctions. It can be good for the stomach. It can be good at bringing down inflammation, things like that. When you look at it in injection form, it's going to be much more systemic. And so when you're injecting it, it's going to be more outside of the stomach because once again, that stomach has a barrier. So it doesn't really want to let things out and doesn't really want to let things in. Small intestine's a bit of a different story, but so when you're injecting it subcutaneously or intramuscularly, that's going to be more systemic wide. So that's probably more for like, a shoulder injury or you tore a muscle or something like that is where BPC is going to be more injected. Now, what I'm recommending to you when you squirt it on the tongue, one of the reasons why I like that is because it'll also then heal the esophageal valve. It'll heal all this stuff down here. Because when you take it pill form, it's not going to start dissolving until it's in the stomach. So they're both great, but I think most people in regards to ulcerative colitis should be either taking the pill or under the tongue, not injection form. Not that injection form is fine, but it's just, as mentioned, that stomach has a barrier. So to get into that stomach orally is what we want to do BPC. TB500 cannot be done orally though. It doesn't survive. So that one has to be done injection wise.
Okay, so for our UC listeners here, like the capsules could be fine, but if you were to do TB 500, you really would need to inject that.
Yeah, the TB500. Yeah. So because they sell the BPC and the TB500 together.
Mhm.
Also, getting a little nuance, you mainly want the fragment 17-23. That's the fragment. You don't want the thymosin beta 4 usually. The 17-23 fragment is the one that usually outshines everything. And so that's the one that I always recommend. Not that the other ones, like you'll see thymosin beta 4, I can't remember what the other frag is off the top of my head. Not that they're not good, they're still great, but what we see in application is 17-23. That fragment seems to be the best, no
Would
matter what.
would that be on like the bottle or on the page when you're
So
like
some
buying it?
sites, yes.
Yeah.
Some sites will have the frag 17-23.
Mhm.
Most don't, though. I think most, when you're getting a TB500, though, is the 17-23 frag, I believe.
Okay. All right.
So.
Learning so many things. And then another immune system one that I think we did use for a little bit is thymolin. So we talk about this one a little bit more. We did all the peptides.
Yeah. So thymol, okay. So thymolin is more. All right, I had a flare. I went to the hospital. Got my prednisone. I'm now at maintenance or whatever. There's still some blood, whatever you want to look at it. That's where thymolin comes in. So someone could do the order thymosin alpha 1 first for like a week or two, maybe 4 weeks, right? It can get very nuanced that way. But then you go into thymolin. Thymolin is more of the middle driver. Thymolin is what's teaching your immune system to do what it's supposed to do, to work properly, to not overproduce inflammation, to balance itself back out after it does produce inflammation. It rejuvenates that thymus gland, which is where you produce those immune cells and everything. So thymolin, thymolin should be very safe. It should be very safe. It can also promote tissue healing. Has a tiny bit. I actually had to re-educate myself, if you will, on the stem cell portion of thymolin. Not the greatest for stem cell stuff, but it does have some stem cell migration to a very tiny degree. So we can see tissue remodeling, we can see healing of tissues and everything. So yeah, thymolin is a more of a middle player, can be very safe. You could do dosage, I would say at least 1 milligram because it is very safe, at least 1 milligram, maybe even up to 3 milligrams. Most places you'll see that they sell the thymolin in very large quantities, like 100 milligrams or something like that. So you can do it for long periods of time. Um, like you could also create a die-off. You could create a Herx with thymolin, as mentioned, shifting that immune response. There's stuff like that. But usually thymolin is very safe. But it's also the one where if like someone really needs help, they might not notice a ton from thymolin, especially in the beginning, maybe over time.
Mhm.
But in the very beginning, like it's like that's where thymosin alpha 1 comes in because like you need help right now. But as mentioned, what I like to do is thymosin alpha 1 for a week, maybe two. Some people have done 4 weeks and then transition into that thymolin. Now, if you've been doing thymosin alpha 1 for a month and you're still having problems, okay, well, it's not, you got to hit the drawing board again, right? It's not that thymosin alpha 1 isn't working or et cetera. There's something else underlying, right? But thymolin is a very, very middle player. It can be very safe for most people.
Yeah. So is that one more of like a maintenance or long term? I mean, we
Uh,
don't do that for a little
no,
bit.
I wouldn't say it's not. I wouldn't say it's maintenance or long term. That's thymogen alpha 1, which is
Mhm.
what we'll talk about next.
Yeah.
Thymolin is more just coming after when the storm starts to calm, right? So you've done the thymosin alpha 1 and everything else, right, to calm down a flare or something like that. You then bring in the thymolin, like I said, whether it's 100 milligrams worth, if you're doing that much, you'd probably want to do 3 milligrams, but otherwise last you 100 days. But it's not something that you need to do or possibly even want to do long term. Once again, you could always potentially get immune suppression with something like that. So thymosin alpha 1, then thymolin, just a vial's worth, whether that be 50 milligrams or whatever. That's when we come into the maintenance of thymogen alpha 1, thymogen, not thymosin, thymogen alpha 1, and something like Vladinox. These are bioregulators. And what that means is they're very small molecules. So they are very good at getting into the cell because what a lot of people are not familiar with when you're sick, symptomatic, living in a poor environment, etc., the cell goes into this lockdown mode. It doesn't really want to let things in. This is why supplements just don't really work in most cases. It's not getting into the cell, unfortunately. And so these bioregulators, such tiny molecules that they will easily traverse inside of that cell, stimulating things on an epigenetic level to heal. So, very basically put, saying, hey, cell, heal. Do your job, right? Fix this right now. Fix what's going on. And when you look at thymogen alpha 1 and Vladinox, they're designed for the thymus gland. So they rejuvenate the immune system and they prevent it from spitting out too many pro-inflammatory cytokines or not spitting out enough pro-inflammatory cytokines. So they just keep it in check, right? It's like a parent making sure you're doing your homework is what it is. And that one can be done long term. And that one is cool because you could do either or, you could do both depending on your case. And you could also do it very infrequently. You could do it only 2 or 3 times per week on a weekend or something like that, really make it last. Can be pretty cost effective. And so that's the one though where if you are sick, it's probably not going to make you better, but you get better, then it prevents you from getting sick again. That's what thymogen alpha 1 and Vladinox do. So they're the maintenance ones after you've taken care of the problem, is what
Okay.
it is.
I want to go back to thymolin just so I can understand. So that's basically like, okay, we're out of the flare, things are better. Is that just like, hey, we're just going to kind of balance out things? Is that what it is? Okay. We're
Yes.
just like reinforcing this state where things are not in a flare. Does that make
100%. Yes.
okay?
Yeah. Like, as mentioned, it's rejuvenating that thymus gland. It's
Yeah.
keeping that immune system balanced, right? Where thymosin alpha 1 is going to do this in
Yeah.
regards to the teeter totter, thymoline tries to keep it balanced, is what it tries
Okay.
to do.
Okay. And that's why we only used it for a little bit. And then we moved
Yeah.
on to the thymogen alpha, and that was a capsule, right? Would you
Yes. And that one's capsule.
do injections with that, or is the capsule the way to go?
They do have injections. I don't know if they call it Thymogen though. I can't remember off the top of my head actually. I know what it is. If anyone's interested, I'll provide it if anyone asks. But yes, you can do an injectable. Do you need to? Not always. No, because once again, if you're using Thymogen Alpha 1, you should be in a state that you don't need something like an injection, if that makes sense. Because when we go to the realm of injections, it's because we need that heavy hitter. We need that powerful substance to get the job done. This is why when we're sick, we need to start with these things, unfortunately, right? We're just in a different society where we can't take some curcumin anymore and and things like that, right? So yeah, you definitely could. They have injectable forms of things like Vladinox and Thymogen, but at that point, pills should be fine. Now, with that being said, remember, everything can get very contextual and nuanced. Someone could be really sick and then just do a very high dose of Thymogen alpha 1 and Vladinox because thymosin alpha 1 might be too much and thymolin might be too much. Right. So I guess I could also say if anyone is really scared to get into thymosin alpha 1 or thymolin, just go with Thymogen and or Vladinox is
All
what
right.
you do.
That's good advice because yeah, they all sound the same. Which
Yeah,
I
I
remember
know.
us going back and forth. I was like, oh my gosh, they all have like the same name practically. But that is super helpful. So I think that is all the immune system ones. Do we miss any immune?
Oh, there's tons,
Well,
but
I mean,
I
like
think we should just
the heavy hitters as far as like,
yeah, I think that's all like in the context of ulcerative colitis. And
yeah.
I mean, let's be real, the context of many diseases,
Mhm.
those are the big players when it comes to the immune system. Those are your big ones.
Okay, cool. And then the other area that we focused on was the mitochondria peptides. And I would love for you to talk a little bit more about how the mitochondria influence like the disease state and the flares and all that, because that was literally like news to me after having this condition for, more than a decade, and just focusing on the gut and the gut and the immune system, and never even like talking about mitochondria. So we just kind of give like a little background on that because that might be news to people too. Because I didn't realize this was a player and what was going on.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the term the canary in the coal mine. And so for those that are not, they during the coal mining days, they would send a canary down there, and if the canary died, they knew not to go down there. So it was like, identifying a threat is what it was doing. And so that's what your mitochondria are doing. They're the canary in the coal mine. And they are constantly on the lookout for a threat. And when that threat load becomes too high, whether that be blue light and toxins and infections and processed foods, emotional traumas, etc., it stimulates something known as a cell danger response. And so to simplify this, let's say you bang your toe, okay? You smoke your toe on the edge of a table or whatever, you damage some tissue, you cut it open, whatever. You're going to stimulate a cell danger response where phase one is the cell coming in, or sorry, the mitochondria is shifting from a state where it produces energy to a state where it's no longer producing energy and it's now producing more oxidative stress and more pro-inflammatory cytokines. So more inflammation because that inflammation needs to go break down that damaged tissue. And that oxidative stress is signaling things. So this is very important. This is why we don't want to go in and just take a bunch of antioxidants. That oxidative stress is there for a reason. So then it goes to phase two, where it begins to rebuild that tissue and then it starts to go into phase three, which then it starts to produce more energy. So when you get a cold, that's why you get really tired because your cells are no longer producing energy. And then it starts to come back in producing more energy. Then you come back to what is known as the health cycle or cellulogenesis. And so that is a totally normal response. That is a totally normal response of our physiology. So we demonize things like inflammation or even the cell danger response. Rather, we should be listening. Why is my cell going into a cell danger response? It's not doing it just because we think something like autoimmune disease exists or whatever. There's a reason that it's doing this. The threat load is too high. And what happens though is this vicious cycle. So it creates that inflammation and that oxidative stress. And like we discussed, we have low antioxidant status, et cetera, or we're not fixing our environment, comes back full circle, further damages that cell, further creates more inflammation and oxidative stress. So we get stuck in this vicious cycle. And this is what can make it very difficult for people to heal. Once again, which is why sometimes we have to bring people to super physiological levels for a short term in order to heal them, hence peptides.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And so there are a bunch of cool mitochondria peptides that we've tried. Do you want, I don't know where to start here, but we were talking about SS31
Yeah,
before we hit record. Do you want to start there? And
sure.
we
Yep.
got
Yeah, that's how I
MOTS,
got the
we got
list. Yep.
flu, we got a whole bunch.
Yeah, no, I got SS31 on the top here. So one thing that I'll say too is with the mitochondria, think of them as your transmission, your gear shifter for inflammation. So they're the ones telling the immune system whether to produce inflammation or to stop producing inflammation, right? So that's where it's like, okay, hey, Curtis, I did thymosin alpha 1, but it didn't help. Well, it's because it was more of a mitochondrial. Well, it's always going to be a mitochondrial problem, but that's maybe should have been focused on first, right? And so that's usually people who are not changing their environment because you can really lessen a cell danger response without peptides. You just get more sunlight, ground, get less blue light, less EMS. Very easy to reduce a cell danger response as per the environment. So when we look at this, in order to heal that mitochondria, a lot of it outside of the environment, do all that first, is that membrane. The membrane is damaged, the walls, and like to iterate the importance of the membrane, I don't remember the scientist's name, but he removed the nucleus from the mitochondria. So it was just the membrane left, and it went on to live for weeks and weeks and weeks. So it just shows you how important that membrane is. It's what keeps, lets nutrients in and keeps toxins out and creates energy and all sorts of amazing things that make you a functional human being. So when we look at SS31, so you have something called the cardiolipin. So think of it as the barrier of the inner mitochondrial membrane. And what the SS31 peptide will do is it'll shield that cardiolipin because this cardiolipin gets broken down or released and things like this, and then it's exposed, the cell's exposed, creating oxidative stress and inflammation. So SS31 will shield that cardiolipin, helping the cell heal. It begins healing that membrane. Another thing that it does is it helps hold cytochrome C in place. Cytochrome C it helps make energy. It's just a molecule within the mitochondria that helps make energy, where that's very important, holding it in place, not only so it can do its job to make energy, but when cytochrome C leaks outside of the cell, it stimulates something known as apoptosis. That is cell death. It's programmed suicide. So the cell will kill itself. And that's actually doing you a favor, believe it or not. And so, because if it sticks around like this, it's just going to keep creating more free radicals, et cetera. So holding that cytochrome C in place reduces apoptosis and allows the cell to make more energy. And so on paper, SS31 should be just purely about healing. It should be just purely, it should be super safe for many, many people, shouldn't have any reactions. I've had so many people have reactions with SS31, and that's probably dosage dependent, to be honest with you, but it also is showing us weak antioxidant systems. You're going to hear me say that another 100 times, right? And so it's these weak antioxidant systems because when you begin healing that cell, you start pushing toxins out because these toxins are going to be in cells. So you start pushing these toxins out. And so now they're being exposed to the system and you're unable to deal with that. Another thing too that SS31 is really known for is cleaving heavy metals. So really releasing heavy metals to the system. And so this is where we could just get that Herxheimer's again and not have enough antioxidants, proper detox and drainage, if you will, to reduce these things. So once again, dosage dependent. So you just start at a much lower dose, 200 mcg, right? Anywhere I've read of some people doing 100 milligrams a day. That's insane. You'd have to be a billionaire to do that. But a very efficacious dosage could be like 1 milligram every day or like 1 milligram every other day, things like that. It just depends on how, I don't like this word, but to make sense of it, how dysfunctional a person is. And so the more dysfunctional, they're probably going to want to do more SS31 until they
Right.
heal. Once they get healed, they can taper down.
So you just put some pieces together for me. So as far as like the weak antioxidant systems, so this is probably what's happened to me is that I'm getting rid of all these toxins, heavy metals, whatever, and having some like GI reactions and whatnot. So is this why you've been loading me up with the antioxidants to deal with the toxins? Is that basically it?
100%. And so,
Okay.
like, not that it's a peptide, and I feel we could tap on it. We might as well right now, because as mentioned, the theme is poor antioxidant systems, is injectable glutathione. And I recently made a
My
post
favorite.
this, and I put in there because oral glutathione, I'm sorry, everyone, just doesn't cut it. It just doesn't cut it. You cannot do, like, if you do enough to try to get up to the level you need to be, you're going to cause so much gastric distress. It's going to cost you a fortune. Where injectable glutathione, like, you're here. You need to be here for maintenance, but you need to be here to heal. Oral glutathione is only going to take you to like there. It's only going to take you to like there, where the injectable is going to take you to here. Even some people, like, just a Monday, Wednesday, Friday has tremendous benefits. And not only is that they refer to it as our master antioxidant, but what happens when you're in this state and you're experiencing this cell danger response, your cell is strategically downregulating glutathione production. It's doing that on purpose. So we get very low levels of our antioxidant system. And then any glutathione that you do have mainly gets delegated to the liver. And so the injectable glutathione is saturating the system enough where you can afford, in quotations, to supply it to other tissues to not only drive down oxidative stress, manage inflammation, but more important, well, just as importantly, heal that membrane, heal that cell, because that cell is going to be severely damaged with low levels of glutathione. And so the injectable glutathione is amazing. Now, a really beneficial thing to do is add the vitamin C to it. You could get away with oral form when it comes to this context, but vitamin C is going to guide that glutathione. It's going to say, hey, liver, you're fine. Let's take it elsewhere. Let's take it who else needs it. And so injectable, I'm always going to say injectable, but in this context, oral vitamin C definitely can have an impact. You just want to get up a little higher, to like anywhere maybe 3 to 5 grams. Now, because we're on the topic of the mitochondrial peptides, a person has to be cautious of overspinning their mitochondria. And so what that means is, I mean, just think of it, it spins, right? It spins to create energy. So I was just explaining earlier, Tina, that think of it as, I'm trying to put this into an analogy. You got a merry-go-round, okay? And that merry-go-round, the faster it spins, the more energy it's going to create. But if you start, like, you got all these people, so think of people as the electrons, right? I think some of us are all the way from, I don't know how early in school you learn about the electron transport chain, Krebs cycle. So these electrons are being moved along to make energy. So think of those electrons being people hopping onto the merry-go-round. So if you start spinning that merry-go-round too fast, those people are going to fly off. They're going to fly off. And so you're spewing out electrons and you are creating oxidative stress. Those people fly off and they get hurt, right? And so that's what's happening within the cell. And then we can look at it from the other spectrum too. If you're spinning too slow, these people get bored and leave, and then the merry-go-round dies, right? So too slow of spin, so also known as the membrane potential, too low of membrane potential can stimulate that apoptosis, so that's cellular death. And so we want to have a nice ratio. So this is where you do have to be cautious with mitochondrial peptides or even things like vitamin C, because you can go from an antioxidant to a pro-oxidant by spitting off these electrons. And so it can be a balancing act for some people, the right dosages, things like that, because some people could have a lot of problems, but their membrane potential might be okay already. Or back again, weak antioxidant systems. That's why, like, injectable glutathione and vitamin C, it's phenomenal what it can do for people. It's phenomenal what it
Yeah,
can do.
that has helped me a ton because, at the end of our vacation, things got a little wonky and I think it was too much fun on vacation and like not sleeping. But that's what you recommended when I came back. And yeah, that has helped a ton. Can we actually go back to the glutathione? Because I feel like this is something that maybe people have never heard of, like don't know all the details. And I feel like people don't realize that it is important and maybe some of the reasons why it gets depleted or why so many of us don't have enough of it. Because when I learned that, I was like, oh yeah, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as mentioned, one of the biggest culprit is going to be the strategic downregulation of glutathione because of that cell danger response. But also, it gets so heavily depleted because, as mentioned, we are in such a sickening society and we're creating so much oxidative stress. We have so many free radicals and it's designed. So the load, it just can't keep up with the load. And it also plays a huge role in detoxification in the liver. And so we're constantly trying to detox toxins. So we're just in a very toxic, sick society where we are just really depleting glutathione. It also plays a large role in like neurotransmitter production and the nervous system and things like that. And we are stressing those out and putting too much of a load on that system as well. So it just gets used up very rapidly. So not only are we like really low levels usually, but it's also getting used up. And on my last Q&A, someone asked, like, why do we need so much protein to heal? Well, those amino acids are the building blocks for these things. And we need things like glycine and taurine and all this kind of stuff and cysteine to help build glutathione. And we're just not getting enough protein either in today's society. So like on the context of ulcerative colitis, half of them can't even tolerate high levels of protein because the gut is just too swollen and damaged. So that's where, once again, an injectable glutathione comes in and can really help, like, think of it from a very cell healing perspective. It's going to really heal up those cells. So if someone can't handle any of the mitochondrial peptides or the phosphatidylcholines and things like this, injectable glutathione goes a very long way. And yes, oral glutathione will do something.
Mhm.
It will do something. But if you're super sick, it's probably not going to do the most to get you out of that state. Once you get out of that state, but you might need the glutathione to get out of that state, right? So that's where an individual really wants to consider glutathione. And like the future is upon us, and it'll be really cool when they come out with different delivery methods of these things. They're talking about like nano bubbles and everything where you can drink peptides and stuff. That'll completely change the world. But for now, unfortunately, it has to be done injectable.
Yeah, yeah. So would you say glutathione's good for just about everyone? And I assume it's something that you can do long term. Like you have me taking it every day. But I'm assuming this is probably something I'll be doing for a bit.
Yeah, so injectable glutathione, you probably don't want to do every single day for a long period of time. Once again, there is always the potential of over managing inflammation and oxidative stress because, as we discussed, that oxidative stress is a signaling molecule. Cancer, again, you don't want to do glutathione because it will shield those cancer cells as well. So that's a big subject. But yeah, otherwise, a lot of people can do it. And if you're not that bad, for lack of a better term, Monday, Wednesday, Friday type of injection can be very beneficial. But once again, if you're like that entrepreneurship and you're working hard and everything and you're burning the candles at both ends, yeah, you possibly could do this long term just so you don't fatigue because it's going to really help with recovery.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's helped me a ton. I mean, that was another one, or that combination, because I had the vitamin C too, but that was another turning point where I was like, okay, we are a lot more stable as far as like symptoms go. Um, we have a couple more. Do you want to talk about MUTC and SLU and any other one?
Yeah, for sure. Like I really like I don't know how much time you got left, but we could rapidly go through these ones because I really want to get to the GHKCU in context of ulcerative colitis. But so with MOTS-C, okay, so MOTS-C is like a middle player. So it's going to help the mitochondria do more, create more energy. It's also going to help heal, where SS31 is just pure healing. So MOTS-C can help increase someone's metabolic flexibility, meaning their ability to go from burning glucose to fat. It can help with that. And that's very important to have that metabolic flexibility, especially in today's society. I mean, any society, but having that metabolic flexibility makes you better at regulating things like inflammation, improving sleep qualities, things like this. So it can also activate AMPK, which is a molecule that helps with glucose partitioning. So it can allow glucose to enter the cell with less insulin because if we're having insulin resistance, so let's go back to where that cell is in lockdown mode. Insulin carries that glucose molecule to the cell and it starts knocking on the cell saying, hey, cell, I got a package for you. And the cell goes, sorry, we're in containment mode right now. We're not accepting packages. And insulin goes, hey, buddy, I just drove all the way here. You're going to take this package. And insulin forces that glucose into the cell, which creates more pro-inflammatory cytokines and more oxidative stress. And this is why we see like a lot of issues with diabetes and things like that. And that's why keto diets, carnivore diets do have a place in that context because then you're using less insulin. And so MOTS-C can activate that AMPK. Once again, it also plays a role in healing. It can reduce oxidative stress, but it also teaches I guess to simplify it, it teaches the body to use energy better. But once again, two things, you could really shift that fuel consumption, and people can get hypoglycemia. Their sugars can really drop, which that is damaging to the mitochondria because now you're getting these big swings, insulin, stuff like that. So once again, dosage dependent frequencies, things like that. If you have a really damaged mitochondria, you probably don't want to start with MOTS-c. You want to heal first with something like SS31, all the environmental stuff, phosphatidylcholine, glutathione, etc., then work your way into MOTS-c. But MOTS-c can cause that overspin. It has the potential to overspin the mitochondria. So it's that dosage dependent. And if you are overspinning the mitochondria, because like if you look into MOTS-c, you're going to get feedback that, oh man, I felt great, I burned fat, all these things, like when you read the positive things. But you'll also read like, I got more tired, my joints hurt more, everything. That's overspinning. You're just, that's how you know you're overspinning. Or the tired but wired. That's another thing that some people experience is tired but wired. That could also be overspinning of the mitochondria. And when we look at, because this is also going to feed into SLU, if you're spinning faster, that requires more resources. So if you're not providing those resources, and that's going to be a big topic moving into the next one, you're going to cause problems. And I'll touch on that on the next one. But that is where we have to watch that with MOTS-c. We also have to watch that beta oxidation is how the mitochondria burns fuel or like burns fat inside the mitochondria. Lipolysis is the freeing of fat, very basically put. So it can help free fat, but you can be freeing fat faster than what the mitochondria can burn. So there's that to consider as well. So we can get a sluggish metabolism, if you will, if beta oxidation is poor with the mitochondria. And so, you know, that could be a whole podcast on its own, how to improve beta oxidation, right? But that's where you could also be experiencing fatigue with MOTS-c. So
Okay.
MOTS-c is very low dosed. I always recommend 200 mcg
Mhm.
every other day, every third day, something like that. Just because a lot of people, especially, you know, if your listener is going to be ulcerative colitis and stuff like that, yes, I do really recommend MOTS-c for ulcerative colitis, but it's going to be very low dosed and more infrequently, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, and we've tried this one, and
Yeah,
what
you have
would
bad luck with
be the
MOTS-c.
reason that somebody might react from this one?
So yeah, like I've read a lot of people having histamine reactions to
Yeah.
MOTS-c. I don't know why.
Yeah. Which makes sense. I mean, I've definitely had histamine issues over the years.
Yeah. So and so it could be that. Once again, too, like this is for everyone. You are perfectly like when you are under the right guidance, you know what you're doing, et cetera, et cetera. You are perfectly safe to be injecting peptides, but you are taking a substance from outside of your body and putting it into your body. So it's important to understand that the body could react to that. Right? It's like an intruder coming into your home. And so it's important to know that you can get reactions, whether it's itchy spots, swelling, or just overall systemic stuff, because it could be just your body reacting to it. Now, does that make it the peptides problem? Not always. It could be something else underlying, and you just need to fix the immune system. But yes, there is always, I used to always say like allergies. Like never believed really in allergies. It's just an imbalanced immune system. When you start to begin learning more about the quantum level of things on the cells and stuff, there's allergies. Like you could be allergic to certain things. It's just your cells just don't respond. It's not a matter of an immune system thing. It's literally just a water resonance thing that people are having an allergic reaction to. So there's always that to consider. So yeah, like yourself, you just might not be a candidate for MOTS-c. Could be the one you got though, like we've discussed. It could be the fact that it's subcutaneous, you know, there's variables. But if you go intramuscular, you get a different product, and it just constantly happens. Okay, you're just not a candidate for MOTS-c. That's all it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. It has not worked.
Yeah.
The other ones have been great. So
Yeah, yeah. I can easily overspin with MOTS-c myself personally. I found that. That was doing it every single day though. It's a lot more difficult when I do it every other day. But yeah, MOTS-c definitely would cause me to overspin. I would get more tired and brain fog and stuff like that with MOTS-c doing it every single day. So
yeah.
yeah, watch for those things.
Awesome. There are any other mitochondria ones, or do you want to go to the GHK?
So let's talk about SLOOP.
Oh, yes. Yes. That's one that
SLU
we have kind of done.
PP332. Did you know why it's SLU? It's SLU is because it's the St. Louis University founded or whatever. Yeah, I learned that the other day. That's random, but okay. So SLU PP332. This one is gaining a lot of traction. A lot of people are talking about this, but they are talking about it in the realm of fat burning, right? And So, caloric deficits can be very damaging to your body. So, if you can improve fat burning without having to do a severe caloric deficit, because a lot of us can always stand to lose some fat because the less fat we have, the healthier we can be. Now, with that being said, don't single digit body fat is not healthy. Being shredded is not healthy. You need that fat for hormones and all sorts of things. Okay. But, when we look at less fat on our bodies, we do know for a fact there's a decrease in inflammation. There's less insulin, things like this, which doesn't matter the disease, it will help. So SLU is designed for mitochondrial biogenesis. What does that mean? That's the creation of new mitochondria. It helps you create new mitochondria. So if you have more workers, you can get more done. And so that's where SLU comes in. This one can really improve beta oxidation. So this one can really improve the mitochondria's ability to burn fat. One of the reasons being a new mitochondria is going to be really good at doing that. So the increase in mitochondrial numbers can really improve your ability to burn fat within the cell. And that's why, like, when you buy fat burners, they're such a waste of money because if they are causing anything, they are causing lipolysis. So the freeing of the fat, but they're not helping the mitochondria burn more fat. Maybe carnitine, but once again, L-carnitine you'd want to be doing injectable. In oral form is very weak. So the SLU or sloop, however people refer to it, can really help improve mitochondria's ability to burn fat and increase the number of mitochondria. So amazing, but why would that be a big problem for some people? A lot of people, and I'm sorry to pick on women, are not eating enough food. They're not eating enough food. So now you have more workers, but you don't got enough money to pay them. So what happens when we can't pay them, right? We have to, I don't know, maybe it's not, I was gonna say, take out a big loan or whatever. Cortisol. We get a lot of cortisol. And then that excessive cortisol becomes catabolic, too catabolic, suppresses the immune system. Well, suppresses a specific side and can raise the autoimmune side of the immune system, depletes more nutrients, creates blood sugar swings, all sorts of problems. So if someone is going to be doing these mitochondrial peptides like MOTS, like SLU, they need to be eating more food. And that scares a lot of people. I know it doesn't scare you. It scares a lot of people, though. No offense again, mainly women, scares a lot of women. But if you start shifting that mitochondria and you start healing, you'll utilize that food and you won't gain fat and you'll maintain a nice body composition. And so if you're going to be doing these mitochondrial peptides like MOTS and SLU, you need to be increasing your food intake. You need to be increasing your calories. And never mind, food is medicine too, right? Food is medicine, the nutrients, it's going to calm the nervous system down because I guarantee you every single person with ulcerative colitis has a jacked up nervous system. But if you want to be able to tolerate more food from a energy burning state, not accumulating fat, MOTS and SLU. So as you use those, increase your food intake. Very important to do that. Very important.
Yes, yes, I do love food. So when we're talking about these like big picture, like order of events almost, it's, start with the immune system, get things to calm down, get out of that flare system, get things a little bit more balanced, and then work on healing the mitochondria and some of these like for like SLU. Would that be like down the road adding it in once you've dealt with these other things?
So very contextual. So let me just say first, like what you just explained in order in the realm of peptides. Remember,
Okay,
first
yes, peptide.
mitochondria in the environment and everything, possibly glutathiones and stuff. But yes, in the realm of peptides, you go in that order. Once again, it could be very person dependent. Go by how you feel. So if you try MOTS, and once again, you get like what you're experiencing, possibly try SLU, right?
Mhm.
Go to that one or whatever. I would recommend MOTS over SLU because of the healing factor. So, as mentioned, yes, obviously having more mitochondria can be extremely beneficial, but once again, someone with ulcerative colitis probably is not eating a lot of food or cannot tolerate a lot more food. So, a lower dose of MOTS is probably better. SS31 for sure, like SS31 hands down, and you could do just SS31 and never make your way to MOTS or SLU, right? But if you were to do it, always start with SS31, all the environmental stuff, heal up. Then you could do something like a SS31 MOTS and just keep going every other day. You could do something like that. So that way you have where you're spinning the mitochondrial faster, you're improving beta oxidation, you're improving lipolysis, fat burning, mitochondrial function as a whole, but you're also healing. So SS31 MOTS, yes. That could be a really good protocol for a lot of people. Never mind, you see just general population who's healthy, right? So
Cool. Cool.
so yeah.
I like that. All right. And then any other ones? I know you wanted to talk about GHK, and I feel like there was another one we kind
You
of
did
got.
mention lorazepam.
Oh yes,
And
I'm taking
so
that
I'll
one.
quickly, we'll go through GHKCU and I'll quickly tap on lorazepam. So GHKCU is a copper peptide. And what it does is it helps stimulate collagen synthesis or the production of collagen and elastin. Now, I'm sure all the ladies' ears went, ooh, right? Because we talk about skin and joints, etc. In the context of UC, a big portion of your gut is made up of collagen. So GHKCU can really aid in healing the gut. It also has been shown to drive down inflammation, right? So we can see that. Copper plays a huge role in mitochondrial energy production, especially with that cytochrome C. And so we're getting the copper component there. Now, what I want to say is actually it's you could get copper toxicity, never say never, but it is very rare to get copper toxicity. And you could just offset it with zinc, is what you could do, because zinc and copper compete for absorption. But that copper also can really help with neurotransmitters. So you really want to do it in the morning. So not only can copper help with converting to dopamine, but it also can inhibit enzymes that break down neurotransmitters. So you can get a boost of mood and energy and stuff like that from GHKCU, which like that's a whole separate topic is focusing on dopamine with people with UC, but so it's good for mood and all that kind of stuff, but also the stem cells. It is a big stem cell recruitment player. It really helps with stem cell migration, which then they produce exosomes, which is that global healing. So stem cells, think of them as blank cells waiting for a task or to heal something, I guess, because that's what we usually use them for. So it really helps with that stem cell migration, and that's where it's a really big player. It's not much of a mitochondrial peptide. It's very low tier in mitochondria, but what it does for the mitochondria is it helps the mitochondria trap UV light more. Yes, your mitochondria does that. That's why light is so important. It traps that UV light and it uses that light to produce energy. You can also follow that up with a cold exposure, which causes, like when you get the shivering, I'm not meaning jumping into a frozen lake kind of idea, but just cold exposures. You shake that mitochondria, you uncouple it, meaning you're going to release that ultraviolet light into the body, and that is going to help with healing, energy production, etc. And so that's where GHKCU is. Now, once again, what we have to watch out for is with stem cell recruitment, we can see a temporary increase in inflammation. With tissue remodeling, like we spoke about earlier, we could see some inflammation. Once again, this is just a response. There's always the potential of surfacing hidden infections. The worst is the post-injection pain, though. That is the worst. So what that means is when you inject, you're not going to feel it, but then maybe like 30 minutes, an hour later, you're going to feel it. And for me, it's very tolerable. You know it's there. You could really get away around this by diluting it more, by putting more bacteriostatic water or reconstitution water into the syringe to dilute it more. So you draw whatever dosage from the vial and then add more of the solution, whether that be bacteriostatic water, reconstitution water, to dilute it. And that can really, or just do lower dosages. But some people want to do higher doses. So, I hate to say that because I don't want to scare anyone away from GHKCU, but it does have that post-injection pain. So once again, you know how you're like, oh no, I'm getting spots with MOTS. Okay, that's something like, all right, like we got to think about this. But with someone with GHKCU, that's totally part of it. That is 100% part of it. It just does have that potential of post-injection pain. Not everybody, and I've personally never done it intramuscular because like you and I were discussing before, intramuscular tends to have a lot less pain compared to subcutaneous tissue. That's once again more blood flow, contractions, so it's moving better, the substance and whatnot. But I will be doing it soon, I assume, if I remember correctly, and I'll try intermuscular and provide anyone feedback if it hurts intermuscular. But like, I'm not trying to scare anyone. It doesn't hurt necessarily. It's just it's there. There's that you injected there like a half hour, an hour later. But once again, going back, stem cell recruitment, healing, energy, so food consumption again. So you definitely want to make sure you're eating enough food. And remember, periodic times of lower calories and stuff like that is okay. But if you're chronically under eating, which most people are, they think they're not because they're gaining weight or something, but they probably are. But the short terms are okay, but the long terms are not okay. So if you build up, it's like fasting. You don't want to fast because it's just going to drive you further into a deficit. You got to create that maintenance or that surplus, then you can begin fasting. So try to bring your food up and then start utilizing some of these peptides like GHKCU, not as worried, but the SLU, the MOTS, stuff like that. And then you can do shorter periods of a caloric deficit to help burn fat or whatever your goal may be, kind of idea. Because I don't care, like even cancer patients want to lose weight. Everybody wants to focus on their body. It doesn't matter what they, of course the priority is the disease, but nobody's going to say, no, I don't want to be a little leaner. I don't want that, like everybody wants that. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Where does the GHK fit into all this? Is it kind of like a nice to have, get stable, like then try
so
this?
I mean, probably pretty person dependent, but GHKCU could actually be somewhere in the beginning. It
Oh,
could potentially, because of the stem cell recruitment, because of that stem cell recruitment. Now, they do have GHKCU pills. I'm just going to be completely upfront. I haven't really looked into them. I haven't really looked into GHKCU pills. If they're valid or not, I would assume so because I think a lot of people sell them. But then again, I see people selling TB 500 pills, and I know for a fact you can't do that orally, at least yet, anyways. But like maybe orally would be the stem cell recruitment in the GI tract, the collagen recruitment in the GI tract. So there's something like that to consider. And then I probably will be looking into that, but I mainly have just had the recommendations and myself have been doing the GHKCU injections. Now, kind of aside from this, but also a lot of people with ulcerative colitis have, anxieties or depression and stuff. You could put GHKCU into a nasal spray. Not only will that help with stem cell recruitment to the brain, but it can also really help inhibit the enzymes that break down neurotransmitters, improving mood, depressions, anxiety, stuff like that. It's actually something that I use to help people get off of antidepressant medications, is a GHKCU nasal spray.
no, cool. That's cool. I know.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to add that one because I know it has a lot of skin benefits too.
Yeah, well, that one you could put in, they have lotions, right? And,
Yeah.
and whatnot. And there's actually like, you and I can discuss later. There's a massive skin routine you could do. But yeah, like you'll see all these places are selling the copper peptide now.
Yeah.
There's
Oh, yeah, I've seen it.
in their formulas and everything. Because once again, it's just that stem cell recruitment, that collagen, that elastin, right? So it can really help with wrinkles and stuff like that, and stretch marks and everything and whatnot. So yeah, GHKCU can be great there, but in the context of ulcerative colitis, it definitely can help with just global healing, is what it
Yeah.
can do. So, but if like, okay, if I had to pick and choose though, I probably wouldn't choose GHKCU. It would be SS31.
Okay. Okay.
I think everyone should do SS31.
Okay. Good. I know I need to probably add it back in. All right. I got one more I want to talk about. And then just giving you a heads up, I would love for you to summarize like where you would start somebody with all this. So lorazepam. So you have me on that now. It's a capsule. And is this like a maintenance thing or, where does this fit in?
So, I mean, it could be a maintenance thing depending on lifestyle and whatnot. So, lorazepam, zonulin is an enzyme that breaks apart the tight junction in the gut. So then you get that leaky gut and food particles start leaking, infections and toxins. Everybody, when they talk leaky gut, they talk like food particles. Nobody's focusing on the fact that it's toxins leaking into the blood as well. That should not be, they should be going and should be pooping them out or peeing them out, right? But they're leaking into the blood now. And then we get kidney. This is why we see like higher or lower EFGR rates and et cetera, kidney problems, back pains even. But so lorazepam will inhibit zonulin. It will prevent that enzyme from being expressed, allowing the tight junctions to heal. Because when we're under these inflammatory cases, stressful bouts, et cetera, we tend to see increased levels of zonulin. Now, a lot of companies are now selling stool maps that check your zonulin, but I don't rely on those because remember, that's just a snapshot of kind of like what's happening in that moment. And when you had that bowel movement, you might just not have had higher levels of zonulin with that bowel movement. So anybody with UC, I think lorazepam. I think anyone, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Okay. Cool. That was helpful. Okay. So we've covered a lot of peptides, a lot of stuff. So, all right. I mean, basically what you've done with me as far as us working together, I kind of understand what is going on here. But if you had to summarize the peptide approach, would you be able to do that? Because there's so many benefits of these, and I think they can really help. But again, they're a tool in the toolbox and everything, but there's definitely kind of like an order of events.
100%. And As mentioned, like if you're doing the stuff we talked about in the previous podcast, the environmental stuff and the phosphatidylcholine and everything, and you're healing that cell, you might not need the immune one as much. But here's the reality, right? When we are sick, we don't really have a lot of motivation to do those things, or we don't understand, or there's always the aspect of changing the cell around also creates more inflammation and stuff. So that's where thymosin, in the context of ulcerative colitis, that's where starting with thymosin alpha 1 because it can have that rapid shift. Because as mentioned, like most people, I maybe someone could correct me if I'm wrong, but that are going to be tuning into this are like, I need help today. Like I need help right now. I'm in this flare or I can't get rid of this blood or whatever. That's where thymosin alpha 1 comes in because it can shift it. But as discussed, remember, shifting that immune response can create more inflammation. That doesn't make it bad. It just needs to be managed. So what's a fail safe? Glutathione, right? So, but let's say you weren't doing the glutathione, you just do a lower dose of thymosin alpha 1. But I think that's where most people should start. And if they can, combine that with SS31. So thymosin alpha 1 and SS31 is what I would say. And honestly, like you do that along with everything else, the diet, the grounding, etc. Like that might be all you need to heal, right? Then we can get in the context of just wanting to be better, but that might be all someone needs is to heal. And sorry, and let's say larazotide as well. So you're getting that gut healing thing. That might be it. Like I've had a lot of people have tremendous responses with just thymosin alpha 1. Now, if you're the person that the inflammation does get higher, add the KPV,
Mhm.
right? So
Awesome.
thymosin alpha 1 and KPV. Thymolin, I don't think a lot of people need thymolin. They could just go, even thymogen, like I think everyone should do thymogen, but do they? Up for debate. But that in the context of the ulcerative colitis, thymosin alpha 1, larazotide, and if necessary, KPV, but I think SS31 should be in there as well, is what someone should do. And you don't want to go more than that. Like you're like, oh, well, you listed off all these benefits. Why don't we just do them all? Overspinning, too much chemical pressure, too much of a substance in your body, right? So you don't want to just do
Too
them
much
all.
money.
Yeah, there's that too, right? There's that too. And
It's
so if you
expensive.
want to just do them all. And so remember, things are done in stages, right? But a lot of people's UC, we talk about that cell danger response. And then it's like, okay, well, you said the cell danger response is the problem. So why don't we just do the SS31? You most definitely could, but there's so much inflammation that it's damaging the cell. So that's why we bring in the thymosin alpha 1 to drive that inflammation down or the KPV. Someone could do just KPV as well,
Mhm.
right? But those are your two big ones. Look into the thymosin alpha 1 and the KPV because
Awesome.
you're shifting, but also bringing down that inflammation if you're having trouble doing that.
Awesome. That was awesome as far as just like summarizing because I know there's so many and we have done a lot. But yeah, like the big picture of like how all these can work together. So and like you've explained this whole episode, it's there's so much nuance to this. And this is why working with a practitioner is so important because you do have that person guiding you as like along this journey as far as like what's working, what's not working. Because we started in November and it has not been a straight healing line by any means. I mean, there's been highs, there's been lows.
Let
Um,
me, sorry to cut you off. Let me interject there. That's something I want to top on. So a
oh,
lot of
yes.
people say healing is not linear. I disagree, right? People just don't understand what healing is. And you're just coming into this now and getting that
Yes.
understanding. And so what I was going to say too, like with doing the peptides, right? I've had many people are like, oh, the thymosin alpha 1 made me worse. Did it? Or did it start to fight an infection that has been slowly hurting you year after year? And there's a die off, right? And so you're still healing because you're fighting that infection. You're just struggling to tolerate the die off. So everything that happens to you is a story. You got to listen. The problem is though, and like I have been extremely sick in my life. I will never say that I understand what someone's going through, but I can relate. So I can relate when someone does a peptide and they get quote unquote worse that they don't want to hear, they're not hearing anything. They just want to stop. They just want the symptoms to stop, right? But they need to listen and say, okay, well, I got worse, quote unquote, but why? what's happening. It's usually weak antioxidant system. It's usually low levels of glutathione. That's why that glutathione injection can be such a Hail Mary or whatever miracle, if you will. And so, but you want to listen to what's happening to your body. But once again, when you're sick, it's really hard to be like positive and intuitive and everything. You're just in that fight or flight mode, which your biology is totally designed to do. And you just want to get better now. And you don't care what I have to say or what an article, you just want better now. Give me the steroid, give me the biologic, whatever, right? But just know that healing is linear. It is linear. Where it's not linear is, as if you fall off of things or whatever kind of idea, or, you take up alcohol. I don't know, whatever. You get what I'm saying though, right? But in the context of like, if you're being compliant to a protocol, it is linear. It's just, it's telling us a story. Any symptom that occurs does not mean it's bad. And it's telling us a story, and we just need to hear that story. And we just need to run with it after that.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously it's like a lesson that I have learned because like I was saying, it's been like highs and lows, but overall I am a lot more stable. And I feel like the severity of the symptoms, it's like not like it used to be. Because if I was in a flare, I was in a flare for months, you know what I mean? And now if there's like a little blip, you know, I'm out of it pretty quick. So anyways,
That's
yeah.
mycotoxins too, right? Like that's the big thing about mycotoxins, which a lot of people are dealing with. It's that onion analogy, right? You're peeling back layers. We got to get to the center of that onion for whatever reason, but we're peeling back these layers and things are coming out. And when you have mycotoxins, these mycotoxins are so sticky and deep rooted that you could be at like not you're not saying you'd be sick for a year or 2 years, but you could be at trying to remove mycotoxins for a year or 2 years. It took me a long time to get my levels stable. Took me a long time. And that was using hardcore stuff too that most people can't get their hands on, like cholestyramine,
Oh
right? And
yes.
so these things are
Another
very,
favorite.
right? And then let's go back to the context of like not eating enough food and all that kind of stuff or whatever, right? If your body is under any sort of stressor, detoxification is not important for immediate survival. So you just start shoving everything into tissues.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
start
And that was an issue for me too. It's just like the overall detox. It like was not happening. And then, yes. So there's like so many pieces to the puzzle. It's not the way I always approach UC was like, it's got to be a GI issue. You know what I mean? It's a gut issue. It's what I'm eating. And like, yeah, since working with you, I'm like, I guess it's a gut issue, but it's like all these other issues. So it's
Well, I
been,
just made a post today on bloating and hydrogen
yeah.
peroxide,
Oh yeah.
cellular damage and everything, right? And like I said, people are so unfamiliar with this territory. And as to is why, I don't know. Like I have no idea why the world is, I don't know, marketing maybe, but anyways, yeah, it's like my beef with specialists, right? It's like if you go to an endocrinologist, they're a specialist in hormones. Well, what do? They just give you insulin, like or they just give you estrogen. And so they're missing a huge portion of the picture. So ulcerative colitis goes so far beyond gut. It goes all the way back to maybe even how you were born, to what traumas you've experienced, to what the status of your mother's mitochondria a year before you were conceived, right? Like people don't understand these things. There's so much good. Family dynamics is huge, like it's so much more than taking BPC TB 500 and a probiotic, right? Sure,
Yeah.
some people can do that and their gut issues get a lot better. But when we're talking about chronic illness, oh my goodness, like we're focusing on it like this when it's really like this,
Yeah,
right?
100%. And that's why I did not get better because it was just, remove foods, supplements. And I mean, we talked a little bit about supplements too, and my opinion has changed on that as well. So, like, yes, just did things very differently as far as working with you. So,
Yeah.
anyways, thank you for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time and obviously wealth of information. I'll include all Curtis's info in the show notes if you want to work with him. I'm constantly referring people to him because, yeah, if you have like a chronic condition you have dealt with for a decade or many years of your life and you're just not getting better, you need a different approach. And this is a different approach and it's helped me a ton. So, anyways,
My
thank you for
favorite.
being here.
Yeah, so I just want to say this quick. My
Yeah.
favorite, I've tried everything, and then I'll list off like 5 things they had no idea existed. I was like, no, you didn't try everything, right? There's always something out there. In today's society, yes, it's one of the most sickening societies to us, but our resources are astronomical. The things you can do to heal are just, it's practically limitless. So always know that there is a way. There is always hope. It might take a bit to find it. There might be, as you mentioned, a lot of ups and downs. There is always a way, though. It's amazing what we can do in today's society. It's amazing.
Yeah,
So
agree. Agree. And that's always what I said. I was like, I'm not going to have this forever. Like, this is just a thing I'm dealing with, but I'm not going to have this forever. And I've always said that. So thank you. All
No,
right.
I love
Thanks, guys. Oh,
it.
go ahead.
I said I love being here, so I really appreciate you bringing me on. I quite enjoy these. They're fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'll have you back for a third episode because Lord knows we can just keep talking.
Whatever. Well, thanks, everyone.